y que esperamos que puedan reponerse de la situación que han vivido durante 10 años. Y también esperamos que nunca más vuelva a ocurrir un hecho parecido ni en esta ciudad ni en ninguna otra, ni en otro punto del mundo. También hoy es el Día Europeo contra el terrorismo ciudadano y en conjunto de ambas situaciones pido que podamos tener un minuto de silencio deseando lo mejor para estas personas que nos faltan y para las que están en una situación de recuperación. Bien, pues damos comienzo entonces a la jornada. Bienvenidos todos y todas a este Día de Europa de la Ciudadanía, que tengo el gusto de compartir con todos los que estáis aquí presentes y con todos los que nos estáis viendo a través de Internet de distintos países de Europa. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos a unos y a otros. En primer lugar, quiero hacer un agradecimiento especial al Parlamento Europeo y a la Comisión Europea por cedernos este espacio, por acogernos en esta sede de las instituciones europeas y por acompañarnos en la inauguración de este encuentro. Quiero dar las gracias de una manera especial a Tom Morgan, responsable de análisis político de la Oficina del Parlamento Europeo en España, que se encuentra aquí con nosotros, y, por supuesto, a todos los representantes de las organizaciones que hoy van a hacer posible este intercambio europeo de experiencias. Según el programa del acto, esta jornada está dividida en 3 bloques diferenciados: una ronda de intervenciones, una mesa de debate que terminará con una puesta en común de las conclusiones de la mesa y la presentación de la Guía de Financiación Europea Programas Sociales 2014-2020. En primer lugar, en la ronda de intervenciones participarán representantes de las organizaciones europeas que forman parte del proyecto JOI-EU enmarcado en el programa Europa con los ciudadanos. En segundo lugar, celebraremos una mesa de debate donde tendrán cabida representantes de organizaciones de referencia como Iniciativa Open Society para Europa, Cruz Roja Española, FEAS o la Federación de Mujeres Progresistas, quienes presentarán campañas que han sido generadas desde sus organizaciones para contrarrestar las amenazas a las que se está enfrentando la sociedad civil en Europa. Por último, daremos paso, tras poner en común las conclusiones de este debate, a la presentación de una publicación muy útil a todas las organizaciones que quieran optar a una financiación europea mediante la Guía de Financiación Europea de Programas Sociales 2014-2020. Esta publicación, realizada por la Plataforma de ONG de Acción Social, en el marco del trabajo del segundo Plan Estratégico del Tercer Sector, tiene como objetivo fundamental profundizar sobre los diferentes instrumentos y recursos que la Unión Europea pone a disposición del tercer sector de acción social para fortalecerlo. Muchas gracias a todas las personas que vais a hacer posible el Día de Europa de la Ciudadanía. Gracias por acompañarnos y por ofrecernos vuestros interesantes puntos de vista que nos van a permitir poner en común los valores y las oportunidades que ofrece Europa a las ciudadanas y ciudadanos en cuanto a gobernanza económica. En referencia a este último punto de partida,
the European elections, we're going to talk about a decalogue of proposals from the third sector, from my platform, where we
de las entidades esto se paga continuamente y lograr una Europa más social que esté al lado de
a more social Europe, side by side with the citizens, that protects the most vulnerable people in our society. Now, this decalogue will contain the following points. The priority is to reduce poverty. Number 2, creation of a commission in the European Parliament to verify the proposals of the European Parliament to not admit any types of actions that jeopardize fundamental rights, to review and broaden the directives against discrimination and disability adopted, especially on accessibility. Number 4, to generate binding directives for inclusion in all member states, especially a directive on minimum income. Number 5, the approval of a directive establishing economic benefits for minors. Number 6, a directive on economic transactions in the European Union that should
cohesión.
The interpreter apologizes, there's no sound in the room right now. And number 10,
finalizo mi intervención dando las gracias a todas las personas que
so again, thanks to all of the people who are here present or with us through the internet, and we hope that this will shed greater light on the values of Europe and its citizens. I'm going to give the floor now to Tom Morgan, who's going to get into a little bit more detail on what we'll be discussing today. Thank you very much, Juan. Good morning to everyone. We're very happy to be here and very happy to have you all here in this very important act. I'm especially happy to see the NGOs, the civil society in Europe, which is a key part of European construction, especially because in Europe, something that characterizes us, in addition to our many defects, is that we show solidarity. I'm involved with some small and
colaboren en algún tipo de organización ONG de la sociedad civil.
And so we support, if it's not the European Year of Solidarity, it might be the European Year of
de la sociedad.
The interpreter apologizes. They're trying to fix the sound problem in the room. So the NGOs and the civil society reflect the European values, the rule of law, solidarity, participatory democracy, and the European social model that we all defend. There's a very broad consensus that defends these values and this European model, which is ours and unites us all in Europe. There are many things that we can't distinguish between Spaniards, English, Polish, and so forth. 95% of us all share these fundamental values, and especially democracy. Working in the European Parliament, It's extremely important. And a participatory democracy, especially where that's where you come into play. This year in May, we have elections on the 25th of May, and we ask for your help, your cooperation to disseminate the message that people must participate in these elections, because we see that this time things are different. Why? Because of the crisis that we've been through in the last 5 years and that we're still going through. And for all of the talk about the end of the crisis and so forth, the effects of this crisis are still affecting. People are still suffering, and it's the weakest people in our society that are most affected. Therefore, we've seen that Europe has a lot to do, both in the causes of the crisis and therefore in the solutions as well. So we believe that it's very important to vote if we want to go and decide if we want to go along the same path or look for alternative solutions in Europe at European level. And a lot of this depends on the results of the 25 May elections. Now, in terms of the Lisbon Treaty, the European Union is a much more important institution than it was before. Almost all of the European law, all of the different fields where the European Union legislation are decided in the European Parliament. And what is decided depends on what you vote on the 25th of May. And this time, the European Parliament is going to elect the President of the European Commission. Just last week, Pepe named their candidate, Juncker. We've decided Martin Schulz, or President of the European Commission. That will also depend on the European Parliament vote in July, depending on your vote on the 25th of May. And it's not just elections, but participatory democracy. In other words, the European Parliament is an institution which is grassroots. We try to be as much grassroots as possible, but it's an institution which is completely transparent. It's open to the citizens. We try, both in Brussels and through the internet and all of our public meetings, we try to be as close to the citizens as well as in the offices in the countries in Madrid, Barcelona, or in all of the towns and cities in Spain. We try to explain, both us and the Euro deputies, what the European Parliament does, what it decides, and we try to listen to the opinion of citizens before we take our decisions. So it's important that the civil society and the NGOs become involved in drawing up European laws which depend on us and on you. So it's a very important cooperation process. We're going to hear about very important subjects today. Just briefly, we're going to hear about Greece, solidarity with Greece. We know that there's been European aid of 110 billion euros. And the forecast for next year, a return to growth of 2.9%. And not everything is perfect in Greece, as we know, but there is European solidarity there. We're going to talk about social exclusion, very important. The European Parliament has legislated on exclusion. The European Social Fund, adopted by the European Parliament, fights against social exclusion with its programs, and we're always looking at that fight and trying to decrease the risk of social exclusion. The people with disabilities, poverty, women, minorities, the people who are most vulnerable to social exclusion, people that are unemployed as well. 79 million people in Europe are living under the poverty line right now, especially women. Single women are in greater risk of poverty and social exclusion, and 41% of the unemployed are living below the poverty line right now. This is something that we are very much aware of and that we're fighting against. In terms of equality between men and women, This is one of the basic pillars of the founding treaties of the European Union. It's a basic principle. There's all kinds of legislation that supports that. In terms of the salary gap between men and women right now, it's at 16% at European level. We're fighting to close that gap. We've also fought in Europe against gender-based violence, and we're also now processing a law which would establish quotas on boards of major companies. Now, the participation of all citizens, of people with disabilities, for example, there's a European strategy right now on this issue that will talk about many of the objectives that will be discussed, that are being discussed now. So with that, I just want to go back and thank you for inviting us to be here, and I hope that this conference is very interesting in this European house, the House of Europe, where we are right now. Thank you.
Buenos días, continuamos.
Good morning. At the beginning of the session today, we just had a few technical problems, but it seems that now the streaming is working. So once again, welcome on behalf of the NGO platform. I'd like to thank the European Parliament once again for hosting us and for making things so easy to organize along with this conference, with the goal of defending a social Europe and also defending the work and mission of the NGOs to contribute to this objective in their day-to-day work. Thanks very much for their involvement. We also want to thank our partners from the 13 countries, Enjoy EU. On the screen here, you can see, we see Lisa here from Brussels. Another person will speak from Bulgaria. They'll talk to us about different experiences, different situations that they're working in their countries on. We're going to begin now because, as you know, in conferences like today's, we can easily run out of time, and we want to have time for Q&A sessions and to make some conclusions to communicate to the Parliament. As I was saying, our role today is to be more aware of the capacity for transformation that the NGOs have and our mission to bring about social change and to contribute to social peace and justice in Europe. This is a unique opportunity. We have European elections in May coming up, and we have to take advantage of this opportunity through the voting booths that we can come up with a more human Europe. Let's move on now to give the floor to one of our partners. In this case, we're going to go to Brussels, and then we'll have connection with Bulgaria and Berlin. And we'll look at the different campaigns that we'll see here now. After that, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll take the questions from those question papers that you have in your folder. So when you have a question, please fill out that paper in your folder and give it to one of the people, the organization people from the platform, so that we can then have a more consistent or coherent debate, and we can group all of the questions for the different speakers. After that, we'll come up with some conclusions, and then we'll put those together with the conclusions that we have from the Joy EU program. And we also have a blog and monthly debates in different countries that you can follow on the internet. Now, in terms of translation into English, we have sign language. We're working here live. Please patience for the translators, the interpreters, and the sign language interpreters. And also, I'd like to apologize for any problems that might crop up during the course of the day. Now, so we're going to go to Brussels. Elisa? Elisa is the Director of European Policy and Social Action, European Social Action, and she's going to give us analysis of the citizen initiatives presented after the Lisbon Treaty, and analysis of the origin and the subject matter. So, Lisa, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Are you following?
Can you hear me? Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Hi, can you hear me well? Everything? Okay. Okay, yes. Hi everybody. It's very nice to be there with you, and I actually wanted also to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the miserable attack in Madrid. So I'm very happy to be that internet basically is helping us to be together during this day. I will present you briefly. I don't know if you have the slide that I sent you yesterday, but otherwise I can share it with you afterwards. I can present you briefly a study that we have done on the first 2 years of these new instruments that is called the European Citizens Initiative, which is a new instrument that was inscribed in the Lisbon Treaty, on Article 11 of the Lisbon Treaty, and gives the opportunity to 1 million European citizens to come together, sign, and propose to the European Commission to legislate in a field that is in its competences. So basically, we can say that the European Citizens Initiative is a sort of European referendum, but how is it called? Actually, it's an agenda setting tool. And it is interesting to actually see that in 2 years there have been presented 43 different European Citizens Initiatives, which quite a lot, and more than 6 million European citizens signed it. So meaning that more than more than 6 million citizens, quasi 7 million, signed both online and offline to those European Citizens Initiatives. Out of those 43 initiatives presented, only 20 were registered. Now I will explain a bit more how the process works, just to give you a bit of a background. In order to present the European Citizens Initiative, you have to come up. Sorry, I have my phone ringing. Yeah, this is because I'm also working in the meantime. In order to present a European Citizens Initiative, you have to gather other 6 European citizens. So basically, you have to be at least 7 from 7 different member states. Come together and basically decide on a topic. This topic, then you need to register this topic with the European Commission and give, which is actually the most difficult part, give to the European Commission the legal basis for your initiative. Legal basis meaning that actually you have to provide the European Commission with the articles in the Lisbon Treaty that are justifying your initiative. This is why I was saying before that 43 initiatives were presented, but only 20 were registered by the European Commission, because out of those 43 initiatives that were presented by European citizens, only 20 initiatives were actually in the competencies of the European Commission to legislate. Now we'll go a bit deeper in the analysis. Actually, 23% of the initiatives, so actually 10 initiatives that were presented were in the social field. So some of them were actually accepted, some of them were refused. For instance, some of them are in the education sector and asking for European education in school. And those initiatives were actually accepted, and they're actually now collecting signatures. Some others were more in the education system, but not asking for the European education in the schools, but more like to have special curriculum at the national in the national legislation, in the national education, and this is actually not a European competence. So those initiatives were not registered by the European Commission because the European Commission doesn't have any grounds to legislate on national education systems. Other initiatives, 16% of the initiatives presented were actually on environmental policies. So some of them, I'm sure that you are aware of the most successful initiative that is on right to water. That is the one who collected 1,600,000 signatures. So this is also on environmental policies, and these initiatives have been presented, has collected more than 1 million signatures, has already gone through the whole process, and now the European Commission will, by the 20th of March, presents its conclusion via communication, saying what they want to do with this initiative. They can do several things with this initiative. They can not do anything. They can, so basically saying, yes, you collected 1 million signatures, it's a very nice initiative, but maybe it's not the right time for us to legislate, or maybe for subsidiarity reason, it's up to the member states to do something, and therefore the European Commission at this point in time doesn't have any grounds to legislate further. Or, which is the most interesting part, the European Commission can say, yes, we can do something. We can do, for instance, we can actually ask the European Commission to, we can actually ask the European Commission to legislate further on. And so this is a bit the interesting part about the European Citizens Initiative, that if it is successful, actually it leads somewhere, but it's not a zero-sum game. So besides the social policies, the environmental policies, there were actually also justice matters. So for instance, there was an initiative on giving right to vote to European citizens living abroad. Because you know now that European citizens that live abroad, they can only, so that live in another member state, they can only vote for local elections and for European Parliament elections. They cannot vote, for instance, for the national elections. For instance, I'm Italian, I live in Belgium, so I can only vote for the European Parliament elections here, and I can only vote for my local elections, means when there are the municipal elections. So basically, this initiative was actually asking the European Commission to legislate further, to give the right to vote where you reside. This initiative, unfortunately, only collected 3,000 signatures, and therefore it's not very successful. So the European Commission doesn't have to do anything, because if you don't collect 1 million signatures, yeah, you cannot ask the European Commission to do anything about it. Then there were issues about animal welfare. on Spain that was actually not registered because the European Commission said that it wasn't in its competencies, but this initiative was about so stop bullfighting in Spain. But the European Commission said this is actually a Spanish matter and we cannot legislate further. But nevertheless, the organizers presented this initiative, and I still think that no matter what, no matter if the initiative was registered by the European Commission, therefore allowed to officially collecting signatures or not, it's still good to have a European debate about it because basically you have the opportunity to show yourself and to to start a European transnational debate. About and then I will conclude about the type of organizations and about the type of actors that are presenting those citizens' initiatives. This is actually the most interesting part. So 18% of those initiatives were presented by European organizations. When I'm talking about European organizations, I'm not talking about umbrella organizations, but I'm talking about European-wide organizations, meaning organizations that have multiple members in different member states. Some of them have their headquarters here in Brussels. Some of them, for instance, European Alternatives is based in Italy, and they're actually having ECI or media pluralism. So European organizations, just because they have members in different member states. 13% of those initiatives, so actually 6 of those initiatives, were presented by young people. And this is actually the most interesting figure. 6 initiatives, and all of them successful. It means that all of them have been registered by the European Commission. So 6 out of 6 that presented by young people were registered by the European Commission, were presented by young people. Young people so are extremely active in using participatory democracy. And I think this is an interesting figure because we always talk about the fact that young people do not go to vote, and we all see the turnout at the European Parliament elections and the national elections, but actually just because they have different means of expressing themselves. And if we let them express themselves through other means, and not only by voting every 5 years for the national parliament or the European Parliament elections, I think we can achieve great things, and this actually explains a lot. And then political parties also presented European citizens' initiatives. So national political parties, for instance, Polish political party presented last year a European Citizens Initiative that was actually supported by a European Parliament group, which was about the suspension of an agreement signed by the European Commission on carbon on CO2 emissions. So actually 11% of the initiatives, so only 5 of the initiatives presented, was supported by national political parties, because European political parties cannot officially, then of course unofficially they can support it, but they cannot officially support a European Citizens Initiative for the reasons that actually they have already their means to present a proposal to the European Commission through the through their MEPs here in Brussels. So this is just in a nutshell a bit here what we do at the European Citizens Action Service regarding the European Citizens Initiative, just to give you an overview of the fact that this instrument exists. It has been used, and it has been used by several actors of the civil society, informal groups, formal groups, and European organizations, but also political parties. So it's very interesting to see maybe next year, when there will be the revision of the regulation that actually the European Commission will put forward, to see how can we actually enhance this instrument, because it's true that now the only 3 successful initiatives, so the right to water, one of us, which actually will now go to the hearing in the European Parliament in a month and stop vivisection, are actually led by very, very big organizations. So normal citizens, quote unquote, cannot actually by themselves launch a European Citizens Initiative and collect 1 million signatures. It's very complicated. The instrument is highly technical, and it requires a lot of funds and a lot of time. And of course, the first 3 initiatives were only basically achieved and were only successful because they were done by the first one by a big labor union, the second one by religious organization, and the third one by activists in the animal welfare field. So the challenge, I think, in the future is to allow this instrument to be actually a real European citizens instrument, meaning allowing citizens with their passion and their willingness to actually enhance the European participation and to actually just put forward an initiative without requiring too many instruments and too many problems. So this was actually my contribution. If you have any questions on how this instrument works and further details on who is using what and what kind of fields and what kind of areas of competence this instrument can be used in, then you just ask me and I will be happy to answer. And this is the end of my presentation.
El micrófono. Ahora sí. Elisa, no sé si te llega el ruido de él. Can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Do you hear me? Hello?
The interpreters are not getting any sound right now.
Es que hay muchísimo ruido. A ver, ahora sí. Sí. Que Elisa se ha ido.
Elisa's gone? She's still
¿Está
there?
ahí?
Are you there, Elisa?
Elisa, ¿me escuchas?
Can you hear me, Elisa?
Desenfocada. Bueno, pues esto es un trabajo que estábamos diciendo que seguramente ECAS, que es una organización radicada en Bruselas, que está promoviendo además la Casa de la Ciudadanía, estará haciendo un seguimiento. Ahí está Asia. Hello, Asia. ¿Tenéis alguna pregunta concreta? Más allá de que os facilitemos luego todo el link donde está y podáis hacer un seguimiento.
Where the study is and give you the link.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Vamos a pasar al
We're going to move on to the next speaker from Bulgaria.
Hello, Vistra.
Vistra?
Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Okay. Es el doctor Minchev.
Dr. Minchev, who you will shortly see on the screen, hopefully.
de la Universidad de Sofía,
from
él nos va
Sofia
a
University,
introducir en el tema de Europa y los acontecimientos en
and he will be
Ucrania y
talking
Crimea.
about Europe and
Is
the
that
events in Crimea and Ukraine. Is that right?
I would like to present you Mr. Minchev, who is a political science from Bulgaria. So he-
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, the floor is yours when you want.
I was invited to talk on the topic of the present-day discussion of what divides Europe, featuring the developments that happen in the eastern periphery of Europe, related to Ukraine, to Crimea as part of Ukraine. I would like to make initially a broader definition of those kind of divisions that are important for us in Eastern Europe and in Southeastern Europe. For the 7 years we've been already members of the European Union, we have learned that the most important cleavages in the European Union are related to the North-South division. And the East-West divisions are a kind of a more secondary matter of discussion. My country, among other countries in Eastern Europe, have also been considered problematic from the perspective of getting enough capacity for institutional functioning of our governments and our institutions in general, in order to cope with the standards, with the norms of the European Union membership. We've been also criticized for having more expanded corruption practices than other more developed, more traditional member states of the European Union, and those problems are part of the agenda which makes us care for better integration into the European Union. So all those problems are in a way problems that represent particular division lines in Europe, which are painful for us as relatively new member states of the Union. But today I would like to talk about problems which are related to the problematic status of our membership, but problems which do not generate, are not coming from the internal domestic developments of our societies, but rather problems which are related to the nature of the relationships between the European Union on the one hand side and its eastern neighborhood on the other hand side. What happens today in Ukraine, in Crimea in particular, but in Ukraine in general, because the tendencies which developed with the military intervention in Ukraine now spread in southern and eastern Ukraine in general, are problems which are very much exemplary of the state of relationships that our countries, former members of the Soviet bloc, are having in their relations with Russia. The countries of Central and Eastern Europe are most interested in developing a particular model of relationship between the European Union and Russia. This is a model of relationships which involves the general standpoint of policy making in the European Union. That is the policy making of interrelationship, a mutual integration and mutual dependence among the countries in the Union itself and between the Union and the neighborhood, eastern and southern neighborhood of the European Union, so that this principle of constructivist interdependence could bring us all into a set of common interests. And we all believe that that approach is the most positive and long-term beneficial approach for our societies, for our countries, if the European Union is successful to develop that approach in its relationship with the Eastern neighborhood and with Russia in particular. The problem is that for the last 15 years, since the leadership in Russia has changed after the democratization process of the 1990s, we have a very controversial reality in which, on the one hand side, we have that approach of the European Union to develop interdependence and integration of Russia and the entire Eastern neighborhood into the European mainstream of partnership, economic cooperation, democratic development, institution building, and so on and so forth. And on the other hand, we are having a model employed by the Russian leadership to consider Europe not as a partner, but more and more as a rival. Starting with 2007, with this famous speech that Mr. Putin made at the Munich Security Conference, and following the developments in 2008 with the crisis in the South Caucasus and the war between Russia and Georgia, following the process of democratization of Ukraine, which was very controversial with the Orange Revolution of 2004-2005 being reversed into the regime of Mr. Yanukovych later on, we are witnessing long-term and consecutive policies of the Russian Federation trying to consider its relationship with Europe in general and with the Central and Eastern European countries in particular from the perspective of a traditional 19th century great power politics, in which Russia would like to talk to the others from the perspective of the division lines which should be followed in order to guarantee the so-called sphere of interest for Russia on the one hand side and sphere of interest of Europe. This is an approach which actually presumes clear division lines of not simply of strategic influence, but clear division lines of the models of social, economic, and political development, which presume that countries like Ukraine, for example, or Moldova, cannot be treated as countries which might follow the European model of development, both democratic and open economic European model of development, but rather to stick to a model of development which is directed and engineered in Moscow, a model of development which should lead to the creation of what Mr. Putin calls Eurasian Union, to be not simply an alternative strategic space to what we can consider European and Euro-Atlantic integration, but to be also an alternative space as a model of political and economic development. That kind of division which we can envisage in the approach of the European Union on the one hand side and the Russian government on the other hand side, was in a way not officially recognized by the Brussels institutions and by major Western European countries. For a very long period of time, politicians, statesmen, party leaders, and so on and so forth were kind of claiming or pretending that that particular division line of mentality, of political approach, and of practical policies between Europe and Russia do not exist. They were trying to portray the reality as a kind of a, oh, well, we have differences with Russia, but those differences will be overcome with more intense work on common interest and so on and so forth. And when Central and Eastern European countries were trying to complain in the Brussels institutions and generally in the European institutional and civil society fora for the problems they face in that kind of pressure which is coming from the Russian perception of strategic interest and economic and political development. Eastern European countries and their representatives pointing on those problems have been often treated as nostalgic, emotional, anti-Russian or anti-Soviet activists who cannot cut off their relationship with the Soviet past and who continue to treat Russia from the perspective of their old standards of Russia as an imperial master in the former Soviet space, Eastern European Soviet space. It was difficult to explain to our friends and partners in Western Europe that we have a structural problem. We have a problem of relationships, and it is not simply a problem of so-called big politics between countries, between institutions, between Brussels and Moscow, but those are problems of everyday life. Because if the Russian party would not like to stick to the principles that we have adopted in our European integration process, principles of democratic development, of open economic space, of particular respect to the rights of the citizens, of humans in general, and so on and so forth, then we will be actually experiencing, and we are experiencing, effects of that kind of institutional, economic, and corporate behavior on behalf of Russian origin factors, generally, to put it this way, which cause particular harm on our ability to cope with the standards of European democratic and open economic behavior. I'll give you only one example with the behavior of the Russian energy corporate representatives, who not simply like to trade with Eastern Europeans and with Europe in general, with their gas and oil, which is something very positive, and Europe needs those resources. But they're trying to monopolize the supplies of those resources, keep monopoly high prices, and in order to guarantee long-term protection of this monopoly status and monopoly high prices status, they're also trying to illegitimately influence power holders and institutions in our countries in order to make them adopt and make decisions which are not in accordance with our national interest and in accordance with the principles of democratic representation and democratic accountability. So we are having a reality in which from Brussels we've been criticized for having intense corruption at high political level and in the administrative and political hierarchy of our institutions. But there is a kind of a shy pretending that this corruption somehow is a domestic problem. It is a domestic problem because our institutional weaknesses are coming from domestic problems, but it is also a structural problem of the fact that Russian energy companies, among other factors coming from Russia, are trying to influence the decision-making in that particular way by pushing forward their interest with instruments which cause rising corruption and more expanded corrupt behavior of power holders and administrators within our institutional systems. What we have in Ukraine now is a kind of a very important emphasis and an eye-opening, I would say, wake-up call for the Western European politicians, civic activists, and institutional representatives to see the problem in its core. we would not advocate worsening of the relationships with Russia or generating new iron curtains, new Cold Wars, and so on and so forth that we've been accused for quite a while now in our hesitation to accept without criticism the relationships between the European Union and Russia. What we're going to advocate is two things. First, clear understanding of the Russian policy and Russian attitudes towards the countries of the former Soviet Union and former Eastern Europe, because that kind of a division line between European Union members of Eastern Europe and post-Soviet countries of Eastern Europe, that kind of a division line does not exist in the strategic mentality operated in Moscow. We are all one. We are all considered to be part of this sphere of strategic influence, which should be given, should be granted Russia as a consequence of its alleged imperial rights. So I would suggest the first important thing is for all European decision makers at political, institutional level and at the level of civil society to be fully aware of the nature of that attitude which is manifested by the official institutions and power holders in Moscow, and this attitude is in the most arrogant way demonstrated today in Ukraine, but in other formats with other instruments it persisted throughout those post-Soviet 25 years, and particularly in the last 15 years, in the behavior of Russian corporate and political institutions towards Central and Eastern European countries in general. And second important thing which comes out of this understanding of the nature of Russian attitudes towards Europe is the necessity to create and to stand upon united European policies in order to properly address that kind of attitude and strategic approach coming from Russia. It is very important for Europe, in particular in the context of the present-day Ukrainian crisis, to try to cope with the situation in a way which will create precedents and frameworks on the basis of which Europe will be able to deal with that kind of problems for the decades to come. If Europe fails to deal with the Ukrainian crisis properly, if it gives up the initiative to the attempt to reshape Ukraine's borders, to the attempt to disintegrate the second major attempt of Ukrainian nation to make its own national democratic revolution, then the collapse of Ukraine will be only the first stage of a process in which other collapses of democratic nation building and development will follow, and not only and not simply in the post-Soviet space, in countries like Moldova, like Ukraine, like the particular situation in Belarus, which is governed by authoritarian regime now for more than 2 decades. But this process of intense erosion of the newly established democratic national governments in the eastern periphery of Europe will continue, and it will affect the European Union in general.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. The situation and the description that you've given us is frightening. Probably we, as citizens, can do something, not just European institutions. So I think your testimony has allowed us to see the situation. We only know the situation through the newspapers, but you've given us a new perspective. So thank you very much, Alisa, also for your presentation, which I think you've opened the door to some new ways to participate. You spoke especially about the involvement of young people. And I don't know if you have any questions at this stage that you would like to pose. Yes. From the perspective of the Spanish civil society, and thinking a little bit about what we can do, not just for the Ukraine, but also other Eastern European countries, it is true that we don't traditionally have too much relation with these countries. We are quite distant from them. The speaker talked about corruption as well in those countries and the difficulty that this implies for using European funds. There have been some scandals, and we know now that some European funds have been used in Eastern European countries in an unlawful way. There can be collaboration projects like this one, partnerships for European projects with organizations from the Eastern European countries. Maybe that's part of the solution. I don't know if maybe you can give us an idea about how to get closer to Eastern European countries, how to be able to come in contact with the organizations from Eastern Europe to support the development of the region and closing the gap between them and a Spanish organization. So how do we make contact there? Vistra, I hope that you heard the question. Did you hear the question, Vistra? We hope that you heard that question.
Yes, I have heard this question. It's really very important to have the opportunity to debate those issues and reach particular stable networks of exchange of opinions and decision making into the civil society organizations between Eastern and Western Europe, because we consider it essential for the European citizens, for the European public opinion, to influence the decision making not only in Brussels but in the major capitals of Europe vis-a-vis this particular set of problems that I have tried to define within this 15 minutes window of opportunity that I thank you for. Civil society organizations, civil society could really play a very essential role in making people aware of what's happening in the eastern part of Europe, among those countries who have joined relatively recently and who have a number of issues and problems that they have to sort out of their own. Those problems and issues are related to the raising of the quality of their European Union membership. The issues that I have mentioned are only one part of this entire agenda, and those are the issues of developing adequate European policies towards the neighborhood of the European Union, because we are talking about efficient foreign policy of the European Union for a long period of time, but this is not only foreign policy, this is a policy of enlargement, this is a policy of assistance, this is a policy of development, in our case, towards the eastern neighborhood, so that we can reach an active public opinion in Europe, which would support the decision-making in the European institutions and in the major European capitals in order to avoid crises like that we had in the autumn of 2013, when Ukraine, almost prepared to sign the association agreement with the European Union, had to give up this opportunity after a strong pressure coming from Mr. Putin from Moscow, which actually was humiliating for the entire European Union, for all people, for all citizens and all institutions of the European Union, because European Union did not approach Ukraine in order to conquer it or in order to do something illegitimate in Ukraine, but to assist Ukraine in its democratic nation building process, which, after all, in a particular format of understanding from Russia itself, is in favor of Russia to have that kind of a stable, more affluent, and more democratically developed Ukraine, in which all citizens will have their rights and their opportunities, including those citizens who are Russian speakers, who are more related to Russia, and about which the big problem is being raised those days, that what happens in the central square of Kiev, so-called Maidan, could be harmful for the Russian speakers of Eastern Ukraine. If Ukraine is stable, if Ukraine is well developing economically and is guaranteed in its functioning of democratic institutions, all Ukrainian citizens, including the Russian speakers of the East, will have their guarantees for free and better life in the future.
Okay, muchas gracias. Sí, como habéis visto, hay
Thank you very much.
Hay Estamos intentando solventarlos. Muchas gracias, profesor.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Desde Bruselas.
We also have Asia in Brussels. He's the director of ECAS. And also thanks to him, we've been able to carry out this program, which is through Bulgaria. ENFA is the organization that made the request, the application to Brussels. And I think this is a very good connection with Bulgaria. We just have a few minutes left. I don't know if you would like to tell us a few things. And so we're always very happy to speak with you. I don't know if you want to make some comments. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I consider that this is a unique project that we are carrying out today, together with 13 partners all over Europe, because first, it's the most cost-effective project we have ever done. It proves one of my beliefs is that the best things coming from the not-for-profit sector can always be implemented with very limited amount of money and very vivid and committed effort in terms of civic energy. This project is a proof for that. For us, it's a very innovative one because we have never tried to connect so many countries across Europe online. As you know, the platform on which this exercise takes place is an online-based platform. There are debates at national level, but the international dimension is provided to internet. We did not know whether this would work or not, but on the other hand, we were obliged to try because we believe that this is the way in order to ensure this cross-country and transnational link, which is so much missing nowadays in Europe. We all are very busy with our daily stuff. We all do very important things within the portfolios that we are implementing. At the same time, there are events taking place all over Europe and in the world that need our attention.
the Ukraine crisis, the Bulgarian crisis as well, which is continuing for more than a year, calls for an answer to those events. I have had the opportunity recently to participate here in a Brussels-based platform where I raised the following point. If the European Union leaders are capable of coming together overnight, going beyond the usual mode of decision making in order to adopt crisis decisions facing and helping the countries in economic crisis, like for example in Greece, with packages of reforms, I want to ask and I want to call for the adoption of such kind of a shortcut mechanism of Europe in order to enable an adequate response to crises which are not economic but are political. This is what we need in Europe. Yes, this is true that the European Union has started its existence as an economic union, but now we see that this is not enough. We have to push and to put forward a mechanism of fast decision making in order to ensure adequate response to crises which are not purely economic, which are also political. Because as we already heard, those two trends are very much linked. So I'm really very happy that I had the opportunity to listen to Mr. Minchev, to Professor Minchev. He's one of the greatest minds that I have never known in my life. I'm proud that he is Bulgarian as well, and I really do hope that this will be a very, very good opportunity and platform to develop more extensive and in-depth and broader links between Eastern and Western Europe. Marisa, thank you very much for this excellent organization and for all the efforts that you have put in having this debate. It's very valuable for me, and I'm really very grateful. And special regards from Brussels. Good luck.
Very much, Asia, and thank you also for all of your participation. And here in the hall, we're having some serious problems with the microphones. We've had some really important sound problems, but we hope we can solve these. We're going to take a break now. We're going to go to the coffee break. And then Asia, Bistra, and Professor, we'd like you to invite you to stay with us for the roundtable discussion right after our coffee break. Thank you.
Prepare for that.